My dad threw me into the snow one freezing night. The air was so sharp it felt like knives cutting into my skin. I pounded on the locked door, begging him to let me back inside, but he only shouted that I didn't deserve the roof over my head. I was 17, barefoot, and shaking so hard I thought my body would snap. I staggered through the dark yard toward my grandpa's old shed. That place had always felt haunted since he died, but that night it was my only chance. I pushed the door open and dug through the dust and cobwebs, praying to find a blanket. Instead, I found a heavy trunk. My hands were stiff and numb, but I forced it open, and inside was an envelope with my name written across it in my grandfather's handwriting. I tore it open, desperate for anything to distract me from the cold, and what I read inside made my heart slam in my chest. It was his will, written by hand, and it revealed a secret my father had been hiding from me for years, a secret that could have changed everything. When I look back, it feels like my life split into two parts, the time when Grandpa Rowan was alive and the time after he was gone. When he was still here, our ranch in Arizona felt alive. The sun would beat down on the dry land, and the wind carried the smell of dust and sage. I would run through the fields with cracked sneakers, always hearing his voice telling me to keep going, that a cane boy had to learn endurance. Grandpa was a hard man, but not with me. With me, he was patient, and I felt seen in a way I never did with my father. My grandfather had built everything we had with his own hands. He raised cattle, fixed fences, and bought every acre of land through years of sweat. People in town respected him, even feared him a little. But around me, he softened. He would sit me on his knee and say, "Elior, the land is more than soil. It holds every drop of sweat you pour into it. Remember that when I am gone." I clung to those words because in my father's house, there was no such comfort. Damon Kane, my father, was always different around other people. To neighbors and business partners, he had a polished smile, the kind of charm that drew people in. They believed he was a devoted father and husband, a man who had carried on the Kane name with strength. Behind closed doors, I saw another man. He measured worth in dollars and in obedience. If you didn't fit his idea of perfection, you were worthless. My mother and I lived in the shadow of his temper. My mother, Leora, was gentle. She came from a small town where she used to work in a library before marrying Damon. She loved books, quiet mornings, and soft music, but she learned quickly that raising her voice against Damon only brought pain, so she stayed quiet, always trying to shield me in small ways. She would slip extra food onto my plate when Damon wasn't watching, or whisper that she loved me when the house was tense. She was my anchor, but I could see the sadness in her eyes every time Damon reminded her that everything belonged to him. The turning point for our family came when Grandpa Rowan sold his land. People thought it was strange because he always said the land was his pride. But he was getting older, and he wanted security for his family. He sold it for $5 million and told everyone he trusted Damon to use it wisely. What no one knew then was that Damon was already spending it on his own desires. Cars, parties, and business schemes became his obsession. I was only 14 when Grandpa passed away. At the funeral, I stood by his casket, staring at the hands that once guided mine. Damon stood at the front, speaking about Rowan's strength and how he had passed his values down to him. I wanted to shout that it wasn't true, that Damon had learned nothing but greed. My mother squeezed my hand to keep me silent, and I swallowed the words, burying them like everyone else buried Rowan that day. After Grandpa's death, life became colder, even in the Arizona heat. Damon would remind me daily that everything I had came from his generosity, not from Grandpa's sacrifice. "I keep the roof over your head," he would say. "You'd have nothing without me." I wanted to believe that some part of him cared, but his eyes were always calculating, never warm. At night, when the desert air turned cold, I would sometimes sneak out to the shed at the edge of the property. It was falling apart, with holes in the roof and rusted tools hanging from the walls. But to me, It was the last place where I felt my grandfather's presence. I would sit on an old wooden stool and imagine him walking through the door, calling me boy in that gruff but affectionate tone. In those moments, I pretended he had left something behind for me, some proof that I mattered to him even after death. The truth was that I was growing up invisible. At school, I kept my head down because I never wanted to explain the bruises or the exhaustion. Teachers would ask if everything was fine at home, and I would force a smile and say yes. My friends stopped asking me to hang out because Damon rarely let me leave the house. I became the kid who was always tired, always distant. The only warmth I still felt came from my mother. She would tell me stories from her books before bed, even though Damon said I was too old for that. She whispered, "You're stronger than he knows. One day you'll see it." Those words carried me through the nights when Damon's voice thundered through the house, tearing both of us down. By the time I turned 17, the house no longer felt like a home. The fortune from Grandpa's land was supposed to secure a future for me, but I didn't see a dime of it. Instead, I saw Damon's new car gleaming in the driveway, his designer suits hanging in the closet, and his endless nights of drinking with men who pretended to respect him. I lived under a roof that had been bought with my grandfather's sacrifice, yet I felt more like an intruder than a son. The shed became my only refuge. I would sit there for hours, away from the shouting, away from the weight of Damon's disappointment. That broken-down space, filled with dust and memories, became the only place where I could breathe. Little did I know it held more than memories. It held the truth that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family and myself. By the time winter came, tension in our house had grown unbearable. Damon's temper was sharper than ever, and his patience for me had run out. I was 17 and old enough to see through his lies, and he hated that. He wanted me to bow my head and be silent, but every day I found it harder to stay quiet. The breaking point came on a night colder than any I could remember. Snow had been falling since morning, blanketing the yard and turning the ranch into a place I barely recognized. Damon had gone out drinking with his friends, and my mother and I tried to enjoy the rare peace. She made soup, and we sat at the table together, speaking in hushed voices like fugitives hiding from the law. For a few hours, I felt like I still had a family, but the peace shattered when Damon staggered through the front door, his coat half open and his breath heavy with alcohol. His eyes landed on the shattered remains of a porcelain vase that had fallen earlier that day while I was cleaning. It had belonged to my grandmother, and though I had tried to sweep the pieces into a box, Damon saw the empty space on the shelf. "What happened here?" he demanded, his voice low but charged with anger. I froze, and my mother answered quickly. "It was an accident, Damon. The shelf was loose, and it fell." He ignored her and stared at me. "Did you break it?" I swallowed hard and nodded. "I didn't mean to. It slipped while I was dusting." The room went silent. Damon's eyes narrowed, and his face twisted in a way that made my stomach turn. "Do you have any idea how valuable that was?" "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'll fix it. I'll try to—" "You? Fix it? You can't fix anything." His voice rose, and my mother stepped between us, but he shoved her aside. "Do you think you deserve to live under this roof when you can't respect what's mine?" "Grandpa left everything for this family," I said, my voice breaking but firm. "It wasn't just yours." For a moment, the room felt frozen. Damon's face darkened like a storm cloud, and I realized I had said what he always feared I would. I had reminded him that the fortune wasn't his alone, that Grandpa had meant it for me as well. "You ungrateful little brat," he growled. He grabbed my arm with a force that made me cry out. My mother shouted, begging him to stop, but he dragged me through the hallway, his grip crushing my skin. He flung open the back door, and the winter wind rushed in. Before I could fight back, Damon shoved me out into the snow. I landed hard, the cold slicing through my clothes. My hands stung as I tried to push myself up. "Stay out there until you learn some respect," he said. His voice was flat, like he had already decided I wasn't worth more than the broken vase. Then he slammed the door and turned the lock. I pounded on it, screaming, "Please, Dad, let me in. I'm freezing." My knuckles turned raw against the wood. My mother's muffled voice pleaded from inside, but Damon's reply drowned her out. He needs to learn. The snow bit into my skin as I collapsed against the door. I had never felt so unwanted, so discarded. Every breath burned my lungs, and I could feel my body starting to shake uncontrollably. I thought about curling up and waiting for the cold to swallow me, but then I looked out toward the edge of the property. The shed. It stood like a shadow in the distance, half hidden by the snow, but in that moment it was the only hope I had. I forced my body to move, stumbling through the drifts, each step heavier than the last. The shed had always felt eerie since Grandpa died, but I pushed the thought away. Fear of the cold was stronger than fear of ghosts. When I reached the door, I shoved it open with numb hands. The hinges groaned, and the smell of dust and rusted metal filled my lungs. I dropped to my knees, searching frantically through piles of old tools and boxes. My fingers brushed over coils of rope, cracked leather, and rusted nails, but there were no blankets. I was shivering so violently that my teeth clattered. Desperate, I crawled toward the old wooden trunk tucked against the far wall. I had seen it before when Grandpa was alive, but he never let me open it. He always said it was filled with things from the past that no one needed to see. Now it was my only chance. My frozen fingers clawed at the lid until it creaked open, sending a cloud of dust into the air. I coughed, pulling the lid higher, expecting to see quilts or coats. Instead, stacks of yellowed papers and photographs spilled out. At first, I wanted to slam it shut. Papers wouldn't save me from the cold. But then, my eyes caught something at the bottom. An envelope, sealed and thick, with my name written across the front in bold, steady handwriting. It was my grandfather's handwriting. The sight of it made my breath hitch. My body trembled from more than the cold now. I reached out, my fingers shaking as I lifted the envelope. For a moment, I didn't want to open it. If Damon had hidden this from me, there had to be a reason. Part of me feared what I would find inside, but another part burned with curiosity. I pressed the envelope to my chest, feeling a strange warmth through the paper. My grandfather had left this for me, and I was about to find out why. I sat on the dirt floor of the shed, clutching the envelope in both hands as if it were the only thing keeping me alive. My breath came out in harsh clouds, the cold gnawing at my body, but inside me something stronger than fear began to grow. My grandfather had written my name on this, not my father's, not anyone else's, just mine. That alone told me it was important, and it was meant for me. My fingers trembled as I slid one under the flap and tore it open. Inside were several folded sheets of paper, the ink faded but still strong, written in the familiar hand that used to scrawl my name across birthday cards and little notes left in my pockets when I was a boy. My eyes raced across the first lines, and for a moment I forgot the cold completely. Elior, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and Damon has done what I feared he might. I trust you more than him. What I have left is yours. My chest tightened, and my hands shook harder, not from the freezing air but from the weight of the words. My grandfather had known. He had seen through my father's charm and recognized the greed that poisoned him. The letter continued. He explained that he had set aside a large portion of the money from the land sale in a separate account, one that was supposed to be held in trust for me until I turned 18. Damon had been given control only as a guardian, not as an heir. Grandpa warned me that Damon might try to twist the truth to claim it as his own, but the will in my hands, signed and dated, was undeniable proof of my grandfather's intention. I read it again and again, as if each word could shield me from the cold. You are my legacy, Elior. The land was sold for money, but you are the one who carries my spirit. Do not let Damon make you small. This is yours. Stand tall. Tears blurred my vision, hot against the icy air. For years I had felt like an afterthought in my father's house, a shadow he tolerated only because he had no choice. But here, in my hands, was proof that I mattered. Proof that someone believed in me enough to entrust me with a fortune and a future. A new fire lit inside me, for the first time, I was not just a boy begging for warmth on a winter night. I was my grandfather's grandson, chosen by him to carry on what he had built. I sat back against the trunk, clutching the papers to my chest, and thought about what to do next. If Damon found out I had this, he would try to take it from me. He would destroy it if he could. That meant I had to protect it, even if it meant hiding it until I could act. My 18th birthday was only months away. If I could hold on until then, the money would legally be mine, and Damon would lose the control he had clung to for years. I imagined the look on his face when he realized his reign was over, when he understood that the fortune he flaunted was never truly his. That vision gave me strength. But strength alone was not enough. I needed to survive the night. My body was stiff, my toes numb, but my spirit felt sharper than it ever had. I pulled out a few old coats and scraps of cloth from the trunk, wrapping myself in them as best I could. They smelled of mothballs and dust, but they held enough warmth to stop the shivering from breaking me apart. As I lay there, cocooned in the remnants of the past and holding the will against my chest, I whispered into the darkness, "Thank you, Grandpa. You didn't leave me alone." The shed creaked in the wind, and snow rattled against the roof, but I no longer felt abandoned. My father had thrown me out as if I were worthless, but my grandfather's words gave me value. They gave me purpose. The next morning, when the pale light of dawn seeped through the cracks in the shed walls, I rose with a determination I had never known before. My body ached, and my skin was raw from the cold, but I carried something stronger than pain. I tucked the will carefully into the lining of one of the old coats, hiding it where Damon would never think to look. When I walked back toward the house, the snow crunching beneath my frozen feet, I knew things had changed forever. Damon thought he had broken me, that throwing me into the night had proven his power. He had no idea that, in trying to crush me, he had led me straight to the truth that would destroy his hold on me. I no longer felt powerless. I had a choice, and I had proof. The decision was made. I would protect what my grandfather left me, and when the time came, I would claim it. Damon might still see me as a boy he could control, but I was already preparing to stand as the man my grandfather believed I could be. That night in the snow had started as the worst of my life, but in that shed I discovered something Damon could never take away. My worth, my strength, and the key to a future that was mine by right. The moment I walked back into the house that morning, I knew my father could see something had changed in me. My mother rushed to wrap me in a blanket, horrified by the sight of my raw hands and pale skin, but Damon's eyes were locked on mine. He didn't ask where I had slept. He didn't care. He only wanted to see fear, and when he didn't, his jaw tightened. I avoided his gaze, but inside I carried the will like armor. Every word of my grandfather's letter pulsed through my mind, keeping me steady even as Damon barked orders and accused me of weakness. He believed he had won, but I had a secret that was bigger than his anger. For weeks, I guarded the will in silence. I slipped it beneath the floorboards in the shed, wrapped in layers of cloth to keep it safe. I visited it every night, whispering promises to my grandfather that I would not let Damon destroy what he had entrusted to me. My mother noticed the change in me. She asked quietly, "What happened that night in the shed? You came back different." I wanted to tell her, but fear held my tongue. If she knew, Damon might find out. I carried the burden alone, waiting for the day I would turn 18. But Damon's control was slipping. He grew more reckless, spending money faster than ever, parading his wealth in front of neighbors, and mocking me at every turn. One evening, after another one of his rages, he stormed into the shed. My heart nearly stopped as I watched from the window. He kicked over boxes, searching for something, muttering curses about Rowan and his fortune. I realized then that he knew. He didn't know exactly where the will was, but he suspected it existed, and he was desperate to keep it buried. That night, I made a choice. I couldn't wait any longer. If Damon found the will, it would be gone, and with it, my last chance at freedom. I retrieved it from the floorboards and carried it inside, holding it under my shirt. My mother was in the kitchen, washing dishes, her hands trembling from another argument with Damon. I couldn't stay silent anymore. "Mom," I whispered, pulling the envelope from my shirt. "Grandpa left this for me." She dried her hands, confused, until she saw the handwriting. Her eyes widened, and she covered her mouth. "Rowan's will," she breathed. Tears filled her eyes as she read the words, her hands shaking. "He left this for you. Damon was supposed to protect it for you." She looked at me with both sorrow and relief. "I knew your father was hiding something, but I never imagined this." Before she could say more, Damon's voice thundered from the hallway. "What's going on in here?" I stuffed the papers back into the envelope, but it was too late. He saw. His face twisted as he charged forward, snatching the envelope from my hands. "What is this?" he demanded, tearing it open. His eyes scanned the words, and his lips curled into a snarl. "You think this means anything? You think a few scribbles will change what I've built?" "It's not yours," I said, my voice shaking but steady. "Grandpa left it for me. You've been stealing from me all these years." The room seemed to tremble under the weight of my words. My mother stepped between us, her voice firm for the first time in years. "He's right, Damon. Rowan never trusted you. He trusted Elior. You've been lying to both of us." Damon's face flushed red. He crumpled the papers in his fist, but I lunged forward, grabbing them back with every ounce of strength I had. "No!" I shouted. "You can't take this from me." For the first time, Damon looked uncertain. He saw the fire in my eyes, the resolve he could not crush. His threats, his fists, his cold words, none of it could break the truth in my hands. "You're nothing without me," he spat. "You think this will save you? You'll never survive on your own." I stood taller, my hands gripping the will like a lifeline. "I don't need you anymore. Grandpa gave me everything I need. You can't stop me." The silence that followed was heavy. My mother's hand gripped my shoulder, and for the first time, she stood beside me, not behind him. Damon's power was slipping. He had spent years controlling us with fear, but now the truth had torn through his lies. I walked past him, clutching the will against my chest. My heart was racing, but I felt stronger than ever. He shouted after me, his voice breaking with rage, but it no longer mattered. I had what he feared most: proof. That night, I hid the will in a place even he could not reach, and I lay awake in my bed, no longer afraid of the man down the hall. My grandfather's words echoed in my mind, steady and sure. "Do not let Damon make you small." I had faced him. I had protected the truth. And I knew the fight was only beginning. The will was more than paper. It was my grandfather's voice, my shield, and my weapon. And with it, I was ready to take back everything Damon had stolen from me. The night I wrestled my grandfather's will from my father's hands marked the end of the boy who had lived in fear. From that moment on, I carried myself differently. Damon still tried to control me, still raised his voice and threw his weight around, but the fear he once inspired had been replaced by something stronger. I had the truth, and the truth gave me courage. In the weeks that followed, my mother became my ally in a way she had never dared before. She no longer hushed me when I spoke up. She no longer looked down when Damon barked. She stood beside me, her voice clear, her spirit rising with mine. She admitted she had known for years that Rowan never trusted Damon completely, but she had felt powerless to act. Now, with the will in our hands, we both knew power was shifting. My 18th birthday was coming, and with it the day Damon would no longer have legal control over my inheritance. He grew restless, pacing the halls late at night, slamming doors, and drinking harder than ever. He knew his grip was slipping, and nothing frightened him more than the thought of losing what he had stolen. On the morning of my birthday, I stood outside the courthouse with the envelope clutched against my chest. My mother was beside me, holding my hand the way she had when I was small. For the first time in my life, Damon was not in control. The law recognized my grandfather's wishes, and the accounts that Damon had drained and twisted were traced back to me. He shouted and cursed, but his words fell flat. His lies had finally caught up with him. When it was over, I walked out into the sunlight with tears in my eyes. I was not thinking about the money. I was thinking about Rowan. I was thinking about how he had seen me, truly seen me, when my own father could not. He had trusted me, and in that trust, he had given me the strength to survive. I used part of what he left me to rebuild the shed, not as a storage place, but as a small memorial. I kept his tools there, his photographs, and the trunk where I had first found the will. It became a place of peace, a reminder that even in my darkest moment, love had found me. As for Damon, his power crumbled. Without the fortune to prop up his ego, he was left, with nothing but his anger, and even that began to fade when he realized it no longer controlled me. He was a man who had spent his life chasing wealth, and when that wealth slipped away, so did everything else. I walked away from his shadow with my mother at my side. We were free, not just because of the money, but because of the truth that had finally been set free. Looking back, I know now that night in the snow could have been the end of me. Instead, it was the beginning. The cold nearly broke my body, but it gave me the chance to open a door to my future. My grandfather's love reached across death itself to save me, and I will carry that gift for the rest of my life. The lesson I carry is simple but powerful. Money does not destroy people, lies do. My father lied to me, to my mother, and to himself, and it cost him everything. My grandfather gave me honesty, and in that honesty I found my strength. So if you are listening to this, remember that your worth is not measured by the approval of those who try to control you. It is measured by the truth you carry and the courage to stand tall, even when the world feels like it wants to bury you in the cold. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, if it made you think of your own strength or your own battles, I ask you to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Your support helps these stories reach others who may be waiting for a reminder that they are not alone.